It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. I'm Matt Barbet. Coming up, inside the country's housing crisis as more than 1 million people wait for social housing. We'll hear from people struggling with soaring house prices, unaffordable rents and no-fault evictions, leaving many homeless and desperate, in a special report from our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin.
Where you see other children their age have the houses, the properties, where they can just be kids. My kids can't just be kids, and that is what hurts me the most.
Also tonight, flying taxis and crime-fighting drones. Yep, it sounds like the stuff of sci-fi, but could it become reality within the next couple of years? We'll speak to one of the companies hoping to fly you soon. Nottingham Forest are in the relegation zone after becoming the latest club to be docked points for breaking the Premier League's financial rules. And imagine waking up to find a Banksy on your wall. We'll speak to the flatmates who live in the building now sporting the artist's latest creation. All that to come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Tonight we want to talk about one of the biggest issues and most basic necessities for people up and down the UK, somewhere to live. The shortage of affordable homes has been mounting for decades now, with more than 1 million people on the waiting list for social housing, according to the charity Shelter. To put that in some context for you, in the last year, only 9,500 new social rented homes were completed. Sky's People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been to Hastings, a coastal town struggling with soaring house prices, unaffordable rent and hundreds of households stuck in temporary accommodation. His report is the first in our new series, Fault Lines, which explores some of the biggest challenges in the country during this election year.
For a one-bedroom property, the average waiting time in Hastings is 4 years. For a two-bedroom, it's 5 years, and for a three-bedroom, it's 6 years.
For millions of people, a place to call home is a dream, not a reality. This is Hastings, a seaside town that sums up Britain's housing crisis. House prices have doubled here in a decade, and the wealthy have snapped up second homes. But popularity comes with a price. There just aren't enough homes to go round.
My whole life is in one room, and he's so used to being in a trapped room that the outside world for him is hard to deal with.
Private rents have soared, salaries stagnated, and landlords are evicting record numbers of tenants who now find themselves homeless.
Just worry that you're not going to give them the best life that they should have.
Years ago, temporary meant temporary, but now it's not uncommon for households to be in there for years.
The council office on the seafront in Hastings is where the homeless come for help.
The bailiffs turned up about 10:15.
77-year-old Eunice arrived here with her possessions packed into just a few bags. Her landlord wanted the property back, so she's been evicted. Last year she lost her husband. Now she's lost her home.
So you don't have anywhere to stay?
No.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't feel very happy about it, because I've always had somewhere. I've never been in this situation in my life before. I've always had my kids, always had somewhere to live. I've never been on the streets in my life. I never thought I'd ever come homeless, believe me.
So this is a list of people we currently have booked in that are waiting for housing appointments, one of 29 pages.
Wow, there's a lot of people on there.
There's a lot of people there waiting for housing appointments. Morning, Leah.
Morning.
I'm Phil, nice to meet you.
18-year-old Leah and her 14-month-old daughter Livia are about to be made homeless. Their landlord has served them with a Section 21 eviction notice, meaning it's not their fault.
I lost it this weekend. I've searched everywhere. I've searched like hotel rooms, everything. Me and my mum were on the phone constantly.
Do you know why you've been given a Section 21?
The landlord wants to sell.
Does he?
Yeah.
Do you know what? There's so many landlords on it just selling, and it's just, there's not enough rental properties for people.
No, but it's just, that is it. And we've lived there for 16 years now.
According to Crisis, landlords are using Section 21s a lot. They're up by a third this year, and tenants can't do anything about it. The government's promised to ban them, but they haven't.
It's just Hastings, it's a tourist town, everyone wants to be here, like, can't do anything about it, you just got to deal with it, yeah. Like.
We've spent a week inside Hastings Borough Council, which is spending a third of its entire budget on temporary accommodation. Housing officers admit they're often overwhelmed.
Essentially, we're seeing people in the biggest crisis of their lives, aren't we? They're coming in, they don't know where they're going to go, what they're going to be doing, what sort of place it's like. So it is really, really hard and really sad.
Tenants are at the mercy of a computer system that requires them to bid on a property they're interested in.
Today there are 6 properties that are available to bid for. In comparison, there's about 1,500 households on the housing register.
Wow.
As you can see, the supply just nowhere meets the demand.
So somewhere today there'll be someone clicking on this somewhere, thinking, hoping against hope.
Oh yeah,
this
yeah,
is gonna
fingers
be
crossed,
theirs.
absolutely.
But actually the odds are completely stacked against them, and it's likely that whoever's looking at this isn't going to get this at all.
Completely.
We're going to go in and we're going to go back up the stairs, OK?
No.
It's OK.
Mommy, alright.
We go outside another day, OK?
Yeah.
Yeah. Being in here, it does, eats away at you. It's like you wake up and you're waiting, am I going to get a house today? And you know, you're bidding and you're getting nowhere, and you get excited for this week and you're like, am I going to get somewhere today? And it's like, you're not moving, you're not getting anywhere. And I think at this point I've just lost hope. I feel like I'm never going to have a home.
Like more than 100,000 other households in England alone, Jessica is stuck in temporary accommodation. It's been like this for 5 years, and she's only 20. And for her son Leo, this small room is the only home he's ever known.
What kind of impact does all of this have on Leo?
He's so used to being in a trapped room that the outside world for him is hard to deal with. Even just going for a walk, going out to a play group, he doesn't know how to act, and you kind of see it in him. He's a little bit like, what do I do? When I actually became homeless, we went to about 5 estate agents in town, and everyone that we walked into, they were like, we won't accept you, we won't accept you.
And you know, we talk about politicians saying that they understand the housing crisis.
They don't. It's all a big front. We're just nobodies. Then you're not important, and you don't matter.
I got chest infection. Me and my boyfriend is sick. We live in a tent.
All of a sudden, Teresa and Eli come bursting through the housing office doors, desperate.
I can get someone to talk to you if you want me to.
Phil tries to calm her down, but she's upset.
I was sleeping in the cold.
Grab a seat over there, I'll get someone to come talk to you.
I'm very stressed.
Teresa takes a seat. She's breathless, anxious.
My clothes is all damp. My boyfriend is sick.
Phil needs to quickly figure out if Teresa and her boyfriend are a priority, so he runs their names through the system.
I think they were Robert out of hours.
There are strict government guidelines when it comes to who can get priority for housing. Pregnant women, single mums, people fleeing domestic violence, care leavers and so on. But Phil believes Teresa and Eli have an open case with a neighbouring council, and there's nothing he can do to help them.
So I've had a look on the system. Basically, so look, I mean, this is from what I can see is that there's an open case with Tunbridge Wells. Don't shoot, don't bite my head off. I'm just telling you what but there's no open case with Hastings because you haven't got the local connection to Hastings.
I went to the office. So what do you get paid for?
We have to follow guidelines, unfortunately.
No,
so we do.
You're sitting in your office. Go over there. See me and them. We're homeless.
Teresa and Eli have been homeless for years, they tell me. Sometimes they stay with friends, other times this is all they have.
When you go to bed at night on here, what's it like?
Like that we're going to die now. Yeah. Our heart could stop any time in that cold.
Eli and Teresa are like a pair of lost souls, and because they've moved around so much over the years, it's just not clear who should take responsibility for them. But in the grander scheme of things, of all the people around here who need housing, it appears to me that those two really are at the bottom of the pile.
Because it's about priority. Those with the greatest need are helped first.
We're going to go and see Chelsea, who's a single mum with 2 children with physical health issues.
I'm out with Vanessa. She's one of Hastings' most experienced housing officers, and her most recent case goes to the heart of what priority really means.
So the property that she's in at the moment isn't suitable now due to her children's health, so we're looking at moving her.
Single mum Chelsea has been living in temporary accommodation for a year after being served with a no-fault eviction. 7-year-old Harley and 6-year-old Jessie both have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a severe muscle-wasting disease that gets worse over time. They're active now, but soon they'll both need wheelchairs, eventually help to breathe, and will likely not survive past 30. There's no cure for Duchenne.
What strikes me about this is how narrow everything is. Kind of the complete opposite to what you'd want if you've got wheelchairs. The kitchen is the narrowest kitchen I think I've ever seen.
It's definitely very narrow. It's going to be hard to find that suitable property that is big enough for both of these kids to live in. And it's not going to be just for now, it's got to be until they pass away. So, yeah.
Goodness me.
It's hard.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
That's hard to say out loud, and that's hard for me to hear.
It is.
Mm.
I'm sorry, it is hard to talk about. Because you just worry that you're not going to give them the best life that they should have. Where you see other children their age have the houses, the properties, where they can just be kids. My kids can't just be kids, and that is what hurts me the most. And that's why, while they're still walking, I want to give them what they should be doing as kids. But we'll just have to see how it goes.
What keeps you going?
My boys.
It seems that Chelsea has the weight of the world on her shoulders. She just needs a long-term, stable home, and there isn't one. She is not alone. There are more than 500 households living in temporary accommodation in Hastings. It has become a divisive, highly politicised issue.
All of these look empty to me. In fact, this whole block looks empty. Why are these homes empty? Grace.
How you doing?
I'm Nick. Lovely to meet you.
And you?
Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Grace is a no-nonsense, straight-talking local campaigner trying to get other locals to stand up and fight what she says is a deliberate neglecting of social housing stock so that it can be sold privately for profit.
So there's 53 flats in here, which are all empty, were emptied last summer. It's owned by a housing association called Barbet, and they said that these flats are not up to modern thermal efficiency standards, but most of the houses in Hastings are probably not up to modern thermal efficiency standards, and we're not going to flatten all of them. So it's just another drain of social housing out of the system.
What do you think about what the government says they understand the problem and they're trying to tackle it?
Well, it's just not true. As I said, the government, all the government's policies are aimed at greasing the wheels of the big developers and the big house builders. That's the only thing they're interested in. Why are these homes empty? We'd like to know, and we'd like Orbit to tell us.
We asked Orbit what the plan is for this block of flats, and they said they aim to provide as much affordable housing on the site as planning decisions allow. But they could not confirm what proportion of the new development would be earmarked for social housing. Hastings isn't unique in this housing crisis. There's a chronic shortage of affordable social homes. Councils used to own houses, millions of them, and from the 1980s onwards, right to buy meant tenants could purchase their homes. Now, councils like Hastings are coming full circle, buying some of those houses back with the help of government money.
It would have been a local authority property 20, 30 years ago, sold under right to buy. Now we've bought it back and we'll be using it to offer to someone who's in emergency accommodation at the moment.
And it's quite odd, isn't it? Because ex-council house 30 years ago, you probably sold it to someone, and now here we are, you're buying it back.
Yes, needs must. We can either keep going, spending £400, £500 a week on temporary accommodation, which just isn't good enough, or we can, bite the bullet and say, right, we need to get back into this, start building up our portfolio again.
The Conservatives and Labour don't agree on much, but they do agree on how to tackle the housing crisis, build 300,000 homes a year. But last year, only 9,500 new social rented homes were completed, nowhere near enough for the 1.1 million people on the waiting list.
Should we go in to have a look then? Ready?
Chelsea and her boys were moved into accommodation. It's still temporary, but there's more space to cope with their increasing needs.
So are we going to be happy in this home, do you think?
Yeah.
Are you going to be happy, Harley?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Eunice was moved into temporary accommodation after her eviction, but she is still on the waiting list, and she's been on it for 7 years now.
What does an average day look like for you from the moment you get up?
I don't ever want to get up. My whole life is in one room. My whole entire life.
And then there are people like Leah, taking their first steps into this broken system.
For a one-bedroom property, the average waiting time in Hastings is 4 years. For a two-bedroom, it's 5 years, and for a three-bedroom, it's 6 years.
Her journey into the unknown just beginning.
Well, in response to that story from Nick, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities told us that figures show that the majority of families who've been in temporary accommodation for long periods of time are living in council-owned properties or private rented sector homes rented by the local authority. They continue, this provides a suitable home whilst families wait for settled accommodation, and councils have a responsibility to help families find this as quickly as possible. That's why, they say, we are giving them £1.2 billion over 3 years through the Homelessness Prevention Grant. And our £11.5 billion affordable homes programme will go further to deliver thousands more affordable homes to rent and buy across the country. That statement from the government in response. Next, a left-wing anarchist who filmed bomb-making experiments in his back garden has been jailed for 13 years under anti-terror laws. 20-year-old Jacob Graham from Liverpool said he wanted to kill at least 50 people by attacking government buildings and politicians' houses. Let's bring in Sky News correspondent Amelia Harper. And Amelia, he revealed what he wanted to do in a manual that he called the Freedom Encyclopedia. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this 20-year-old will have to spend 13 years behind bars in a young offenders institute for writing and sharing a how-to bomb-making manual. This is a student from Liverpool, from the Norris Green area. He wrote a Freedom Encyclopedia on weapons and bombs that he said was dedicated to misfits and social nobodies. So there was a 5-week trial earlier last month, and he was convicted of 1 count of preparing acts of terrorism by actually making this encyclopedia, 4 counts of possessing documents useful for terrorism, and 2 counts of disseminating terrorist publications. He was cleared of planning an attack, but the court had heard that his main motivation for his actions was a hatred for the government. Now, during the sentencing, the judge, Mr. Justice Goose, had said he was a very dangerous individual and referred to the fact that during the trial, he had called himself the UK's first homegrown terrorist. Now, his actions were discovered by security services, actually, after an investigation into the purchase of chemicals online. And as part of the court process, we heard that under the name Destro the Destroyer, he'd recorded dozens of videos in his home in Liverpool, ready to be released on the day of the attack. And also, he wrote in a plan about wanting to kill 50 people, and the method of doing that was attacking government buildings and politicians' houses. So he will, for his actions now, have to spend 13 years in a young offenders institution.
Amelia, thank you very much. Let's go to Westminster now, where MPs are voting this evening on amendments to the government's controversial Rwanda bill, which could face more challenges from backbench MPs. We can chat to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's in the central lobby for us this evening. And John, this is being called parliamentary ping-pong because it's going back and forth from the Commons to the Lords. It'll go back there again. But I gather they've just voted for the first time this evening.
Yes, big majority for the government, 78, 328 to 150. They're on the second now. There's going to be 10 votes in all. That's because the House of Lords over the last week or so passed 10 amendments to the very controversial Rwanda bill. The one they've just rejected from the Lords is one where the House of Lords were challenging the claim in the bill that Rwanda is a safe country. That was denounced by the likes of Kenneth Clarke, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and others when it was debated in the House of Lords. So we will presumably get lots of big government majorities here. There might be a mini rebellion on the Tory backbenches because Sir Robert Buckland, a former government law officer, now chairs the Northern Ireland Select Committee. He said towards the end of the debate he was considering rebelling on some of the 10 amendments that are going to be voted on. But government majority of 78, well, that's a very healthy majority. Rishi Sunak was in the chamber. Don't often see him in the chamber for votes in the evening, but he was obviously there to rally the troops. I'm told he didn't stay there very long. But what's going to happen once the Commons throws out all these Lords' amendments is that on Wednesday it will go back to the House of Lords, and they will have to decide, are they going to send it back, pass all those amendments again, or ones similar to them, or just a few of them. I'm told by senior government figures that if the Lords were to send back, say, another 10 amendments, then that would delay things and it wouldn't get onto the statute book by Easter, which would frustrate the government because the Prime Minister's been talking today about flights to Rwanda taking off in the spring. So, yes, it's ping-pong, where I suppose we're on the ping. Then Wednesday we get the pong, if you don't mind me saying so. But this is what happens when the House of Lords reject bills passed by the Commons. The Prime Minister has talked about the will of the people. Many Tory MPs speaking in the debate were accusing the Lords of wrecking amendments. Well, they certainly are wrecking amendments, really. Stephen Kinnock for Labour was talking about improving the bill, but in actual fact, the Lords ripped the guts out of the bill, and the government is determined to overturn all these amendments passed in the Lords, which they have just started doing, and the next stage is back to the Lords on Wednesday.
John, you can call it pong if you like. Others may argue against that. Appreciate it. Still to come on the UK Tonight. Could flying taxis take to the UK skies in the next couple of years? We'll be speaking to one of the companies that's hoping to fly you from A to B. Also ahead, we'll have all the details as Nottingham Forest adopt 4 points for breaking Premier League rules. We'll chat to the flatmates who woke up to find a blooming good Banksy had appeared on their wall overnight.
Sleep is so important. It's essential to maintain our physical health, our cognitive function, emotional regulation, mental health. It really is very, very far-reaching, and the impact is huge. Looking on our mental health, the impact on our mental health, we know that when we're sleep deprived, we might feel more irritable, frustrated, maybe a bit more moody. Also, our stress and anxiety levels are on the increase. There's a very strong connection between stress and anxiety and sleep deprivation, in that the more stressed and anxious we are, the more likely that is to affect our sleep. And consequently, the more sleep deprived we are, the more that is potentially going to increase our stress and anxiety levels. And also simply the energy to be able to be productive in our day, keep organized in our day, exercise. It's got huge, huge implications. There's so many things that we can do to improve our sleep. So I would, just pulling out a few of the main tips, I would say, first of all, regulating your wake-up time as much as possible. We all have an internal body clock, our circadian rhythm, that dictates our sleep-wake cycle. And if we're waking at very fluctuating times, then that's going to leave us feeling quite groggy and impact on our sleep cycles, almost leave us in a permanent state of a feeling of jet lag. So really trying to regulate our wake-up time as much as possible. Obviously, that's not always possible, especially people like you guys that are often working shift work as well, but in as much as possible. Also, allowing ourselves time, and I talk about permission and giving ourselves permission to have wind down leading up to bedtime. We talk about this for children all the time, the importance of a bedtime routine, but it's really important that we as adults, we have that same wind down time, that we allow ourselves to be able to ease into sleep rather than jumping into sleep, because that can really exacerbate sleep problems.
Now, the prospect of flying taxis in the skies above the UK might be a little bit closer than you previously thought. As part of the government's aviation action plan, we could see the first piloted taxis in the skies in 2 years, and they could go pilotless by 2030. Well, Nathan is Head of Public Affairs at Vertical Aerospace and joins me now. I bet you're quite excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, very excited about this, Matt. We've been working on this technology for a long time. Vertical alone has been going for 8 years. And we're finally getting closer to the point where we can bring these to consumers and to passengers around the country and around the world. These are fully battery-powered flying taxis. They're much more than just flying taxis, I should say. They're also looking at how we get goods around. We're looking at emergency services applications, but yes, flying passengers around is also one of the use cases that we're looking at. But really excited to be bringing it to the UK and to many other markets around the world within the next few years.
Well, we've had big planes taking us places for decades now, but only quite recently we've also had air traffic control nightmares. So just how safe is it?
So that's a really good question, and it's one thing that we're working very closely with the regulator on. In the UK, we're aiming for a safety objective. We're targeting levels as safe as any other form of commercial air transport. So when you're getting on your Airbus aircraft taking you on holiday to Europe, that's a very, very safe way of traveling, and that's exactly the same standard that is expected of us, both by the regulator and our customers here in the UK. And so we're working closely with the regulator over the course of the next few years to prove that the technology is safe, to prove that it can fly across cities and over people's homes, so we can really get this technology in the sky.
It sounds convenient, but what about the people living underneath? There are plenty of people who live under flight paths at the moment. Sorry to take this negative tack, by the way, but we need to challenge this. I'm sure you understand. People live under flight paths now in big cities and they don't like the planes. But what about all these other things? And I know it's not just your craft either, but other things like drones that can now fly out of sight. That's the plan. Mm-hmm. They're going to disrupt people's lives, aren't they? Something buzzing overhead constantly.
Well, we are acutely aware that for the success of this particular product, not only in the UK, but all around the world, it will require support from the public. And that's why we're committed to making this aircraft as quiet as possible. We expect it to be similar to having a background conversation or cars, and the reason, or with background traffic. And the reason we can make it so quiet is because of the electric propulsion system, which is not like a gas turbine engine that you'd be familiar with with traditional aviation in either an airplane or a helicopter. This is much, much, much more akin to a car driving past. So it is significantly quieter. obviously cleaner, and that is it is zero emissions in operation, and also a lot safer than other forms of transport.
Tell us about the pilotless aspiration. Now, look, we've been hearing about driverless cars for quite a while now, but still they're not passed to drive on our roads every day. Can we really expect to see pilotless craft in our skies before the end of the decade?
Well, interestingly, the technology challenge with pilotless aircraft is easier than it is with automotive. However, we don't believe that passengers will accept a pilotless aircraft, certainly at the point of entry into service, and for some time to come. So it's very much our technology roadmap. Yes, in the future, you might see pilotless aircraft. Yes, they might be autonomous, but we're certainly focused on having our aircraft with a pilot in it from day one.
Okay. Look, final couple of questions. I'm assuming you're doing a lot of testing right now. Have you actually flown in your vehicle yet? And if so, what's it like?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Or I personally haven't, no. Unfortunately, only test pilots can fly in the prototype aircrafts under regulatory rules. But they assure me it's very...
Two years is a bit ambitious, isn't it?
Well, so up until the point of certification, which we're targeting at the end of 2026, you can't carry passengers. That's the process for all aviation. It's the same if you're in a new Airbus aircraft. Only test pilots would be flying it up until the point of certification. So it's not unusual. I understand why you would say that, but it is not unusual.
Now, look, anybody out there trying to get a taxi home this evening, going on certain apps, and there are more than one, will be more than aware with surge pricing and also how fewer these vehicles are out there when you really want one. It's so annoying. What's the cost going to be for jumping in one of your things and getting flown home?
So firstly, I should point out that we're just a manufacturer. So we're building an aircraft and selling it to customers. And those customers tend to be airlines, not exclusively airlines. We work with big helicopter operators and emergency services companies as well. So it'll ultimately be up to them how much they charge. But we would expect it to be a premium service at the point of entry into service, because we have, there will be a lot of demand but limited supply. But really, this is a much cheaper aircraft to operate than anything on the market. It's low maintenance costs. It's cheaper to build. So over time, we would expect it to be comparable with, compete against ground transport.
Will, really appreciate you taking the time. I wish they were only ready in half an hour when I'm done for the evening. I've got a long drive home, sadly, a bit too soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Still to come on the UK Tonight. We're talking to a midwife about what more can be done to help the 30,000 women who experience birth trauma every year.
Bornfree's 40th anniversary. I can't believe that I co-founded it 40 years ago with my mum, Virginia McKenna, and my dad, Bill Travers. And what a great way to celebrate with these two young lions, Zar and Jamil. They, as you rightly say, they came from a zoo, but actually from an ostrich farm. And it was Ukrainian animal activists who first alerted everyone to the situation, managed to get the animals away from the ostrich farm and via various routes through Poland and then into Belgium to a halfway house. And then we've been able, with the help of incredible people, British Airways Holidays, Cargo Lux, DHL, our team at Shamwari in South Africa, it's been an incredible team effort to get them to South Africa, where they will live the rest of their lives. It's not complete freedom. It can never be complete freedom. These animals have been in captivity too long, and it would be too difficult and too dangerous to return them fully to the wild, but they will have a life worth living. The lions do need all sorts of paperwork. In fact, it's one of the biggest challenges that anyone who moves animals from one country to another, wild animals from one country to another, especially when it's difficult to get the original paperwork when you have a country like Ukraine, which is facing so many challenges. You have to have the export paperwork, the health paperwork, the veterinary paperwork to get them out of the country. And then you have to have the reciprocal paperwork in South Africa. And hats off to both the Ukrainian and the South African authorities for expediting the paperwork to allow this move to go ahead, because without it, it can't. Well, they will have an enclosure. It'll be about the size of a football field. it's natural South African bush, which at least ancestrally they would have evolved to live in. They'll be looked after 365 days a year. We have an incredible expert team down there led by Glenn and Catherine and Dr. Johan Joubert, who is a world-renowned veterinarian, along with the other big cats that we've rescued, and they will have a quality of life.
Welcome back to the UK Tonight. The first ever parliamentary inquiry into the trauma experienced by thousands of mothers every year during childbirth will publish its findings next month. Our correspondent Shaman Freeman-Powell has been speaking to one mother who was left with lifelong injuries after giving birth. A warning that her report contains graphic descriptions of her injuries.
When Jill gave birth to her son in 2011, her life changed in ways she could never have imagined.
I remember saying to my mum, I've gone in to hospital, perfectly healthy, a working police officer, and I've come out disabled, without my job. You know, all I wanted was a baby.
She got her baby, and to Jill, he was perfect. But her birthing experience was traumatic, and her injuries lifelong.
I was left with a missed 4th-degree tear, which is when you're split in two completely. I had a rectovaginal fistula, which is an extremely rare complication. So I had a hole between my rectum and my vagina. So I was pooing out of my vagina. Ultimately, 7 days after the birth, I was fitted with an emergency colostomy, which is a stoma, which I still have.
Graphic details, shared frankly, because Jill knows that she's speaking on behalf of many other women. And now women in positions of power are using their own stories to generate change.
And obviously it was not looking good. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Will my honourable friend give way? Yes, I'll give way.
Stafford MP Theo Clark shared her emotional birthing story with Parliament before leading the first cross-party inquiry into birthing trauma.
I actually thought it was really important to share my story, and I'm really struck there seems to be a real taboo around talking about the issues with childbirth. And what I really hope with this inquiry is that we'll come up with very practical recommendations to the Prime Minister and say, you know, this is what mums are telling us they need.
The Department for Health and Social Care said, "We are committed to making the NHS the safest place in the world to give birth. That's why birth trauma support is among the top priorities for the Women's Health Strategy in 2024. A priority for Jill too, who set up a charity to help others.
And I raised £10,000 as a result of doing that. The most important is to show my son that his birth didn't ruin my life. I don't want anyone to suffer like I did.
Continuing the push for change for expectant mothers when the unexpected happens. Shimon Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Joining me now is Leah Hazard, an NHS midwife and author. Leah, thanks for joining us on the UK Tonight. Look, I'm a dad, so I can only empathise with what mums have to go through giving birth. But is there ever a birth that isn't traumatic in some way?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, I think the fact that you're even asking that question, whether a non-traumatic birth is possible, shows how bad things have really gotten. You know, that we've forgotten the fact that it can actually be safe, healthy, empowering, dignified. But sadly, in our current NHS, in an extremely overstretched and under-resourced maternity service, birth trauma is rife. And rather than providing individualized care to everyone who comes through the door, what we've got is more of a kind of industrialized assembly line. And that is a ripe environment for trauma.
How does that manifest itself then? You say an industrialised assembly line. Are we talking about favouring C-sections over natural birth, that kind of thing?
It's not necessarily that at all, although that's an entirely fair question. And I think oftentimes in the media and in reports, you'll see what's called a natural birth ideology pitted against interventions like caesarean section. It's not at all that caesarean section is inherently bad or wrong. The problem is that the service is so overstretched that we don't have the time to give the proper individualized holistic care that people need. And unfortunately, sometimes interventions are applied in a kind of blanket manner when perhaps they could have been avoided. And, it's not even necessarily the intervention itself that can be traumatic. We know that actually it's not the mode of delivery that causes postnatal mental health difficulties. It's actually whether that person feels that they have agency over their birth experience, that they've been a partner in their own care, and that it's been collaborative. And sadly, that's not always happening.
Yeah, I wanted to come at it from that point of view. There seems to be quite a bit of societal pressure on mums-to-be to do it a certain way, as, like you say, in inverted commas, as natural as possible. And if they are then having an epidural or even gas and air, that somehow they're not doing it right. Is that your experience?
I mean, I think sadly that is true to some extent, that there is a lot of pressure on women and birthing people to do birth a certain way. And I can absolutely tell you, as a midwife of over 10 years experience, that there is no right or wrong way to give birth. Whatever way you give birth is your way. It's the right way. It's innate and inherent to you. So it's really important not to stigmatize people for the choices they make, and also to point out that in many cases, we think our choices are not really true choices. They're just one of several quite restricted options, and that's really not okay either.
What are the alternatives then right now?
Well, the main alternative would be an adequately funded maternity service. I mean, over the last 14 years, we've seen the Conservative Party systematically degrade and underfund the maternity service in the NHS. They've promised more money. It hasn't really translated yet, unfortunately, into adequate numbers of staff and improved levels of safety. Even this most recent tranche of an extra £35 million of maternity funding is, really kind of offering crumbs to what is a massive problem. The Tories have promised 160 midwives over 3 years. It's just absolutely laughable.
I mean, the government isn't here to defend itself. They would point to that as an investment. They would probably also say that this goes back way further in terms of investment beyond the current government's investment. They would also say they are carrying out an inquiry. So what do you hope the inquiry finds?
Well, I mean, certainly many people like Jill Castle, who was featured in your segment, have been very generous with their time and their experience, and that's really difficult and vulnerable to give that kind of testimony. So I hope that's respected and honoured, not only with recommendations, which are all well and good, with genuine action and with the funds and the resources to back up that action.
Look, final couple of questions to you, Leah. I also hear from midwives, I speak to them, friends who are midwives say they're really struggling with the workload. And then you also hear that there are no midwives coming through the system because they are put off by hearing about that from existing people working in midwifery. So it's a problem from both sides.
It's absolutely a problem from both sides. There is a recruitment and a retention problem in midwifery now. And, it's often compared to trying to fill a leaky bucket. We have to make the system and the working conditions better so that people don't leave, and also so that the profession is appealing to those who might be interested in serving.
Leah, appreciate you joining us from Scotland. It's important to say that this inquiry is looking at the situation across the UK, despite obviously differences in devolved powers. Leah Hazard there, midwife and author, joining us to talk about this. OK. Next, the River Test in Hampshire, one of only 200 chalk streams in the world, is under threat because of the amount of untreated waste that's being dumped there. Sewage fungus is suffocating aquatic life, killing tiny fish and threatening the river's entire ecosystem. Environmental campaigners and residents are protesting the decision by Southern Water. Sky's science correspondent Thomas Moore has the story.
The River Test in Hampshire, a rare chalk stream famed for its pure water. But this is raw, untreated human waste pouring into it from a sewage plant, and it's been going on for weeks. Only by collecting a sample of the riverbed can you see the damage it's done. This is from a healthy stretch of water.
And you can see it is just crawling with life here, isn't it?
I mean, there's case caddis here, there's shrimps going about, snails.
And this from an area affected by sewage.
It's got one shrimp there, and one shrimp there.
It's not much there at all.
No. It's just killing it. just completely killing the river system, an ecosystem which is fragile anyway with, you know, changing climate and, you know, the extreme weather patterns we have coming through. And this, you know, doing the sample was giving a clear indicator that the sewage coming in that side is killing our invertebrates.
Chalk streams are heavily protected, home to trout and salmon, but the extreme nutrients in the sewage are fueling rapid growth of alien life, grey tufts wafting in the current.
This is sewage fungus. It's a gelatinous slime of viruses, bacteria and other organisms. It coats the plants, it sucks oxygen out of the water and it suffocates the life that should be in the river.
Is united here today to raise their voices.
Outside the sewage works, local people and river campaigners demanded an end to the dumping. They say claims by the water company that they have to stop it backing up into customers' homes just won't wash.
Yes, it might have been a damp February, a very damp February, but that doesn't mean that they should be putting raw sewage directly into the river. It just doesn't. It's unforgivable.
There has been so much rain that water underground is being forced into sewers through cracks and joints. Scientists have been warning for many years that climate change would bring wetter winters, but Southern Water says it could be 2030 before all the pipes are fixed.
I understand the frustration, and we share many of their outcomes of what they want to see happen. But there are a series of steps we must take. It is a large, complex issue. We are in some extreme conditions right now.
Rivers around the country are being polluted by sewage. Campaigners want to make this an election issue, forcing water companies to clean up their act. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Hampshire.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll speak to two of the residents who woke up to find a new Banksy artwork on their wall in North London. And in football, Nottingham Forest have docked 4 points for breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules.
Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want them.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. We'll take a look at the new Banksy that sprung up in North London in a bit. But first, Nick is here with the sport. And I think the big story today in football is that Nottingham Forest have been deducted 4 points by the Premier League, and this is around the financial fair play situation. Tell us more.
Yeah, strictly speaking, by an independent panel appointed by the Premier League, but they make the point that it's not the league themselves. But basically, they've spent more money than they should. There are rules. You're allowed to spend a certain amount more money than you take in, but you can't just spend what you like. They've spent £34.5 million more than they should have done, so they've been docked 4 points. It would have been 6 points, but the panel accepted that they'd admitted the offence straight away and that they were fully cooperative. So it is 4 points. Forest say they're really upset. And one of the points they're making, it's an important point that affects other clubs as well, potentially, is how are you meant to, as a promoted club that came out from the Championship last season, how else are you going to compete with the mighty clubs of the Premier League unless you spend a lot of money? That's what they did. But on the other hand, the counter-argument is the rules are the rules. They knew what the rules were and they've broken them, no question.
Puts Forest in the relegation zone, Luton just above them and Everton above them. They've also been docked points as well. What happens next?
Well, they're consulting lawyers, Forest, about whether they should appeal or not. They've got a week to decide on that. They have to have it all decided by May the 25th, which is 6 days after the end of the Premier League season. So you could play the last day of the Premier League season not being sure, even at the end of the games, who's going up and who's not. So they've got the possibility of appealing. Also, Everton may yet get a further punishment because they face separate charges in addition to the ones for which they've already been deducted points. And the big elephant in the room, Manchester City, this won't be for this season, but Manchester City face more than 100 charges, different charges. Everybody stresses for breaching financial rules as well. So it's all a bit of a mess, but you have to have rules, and Forest have clearly broken them. The other main sports story today is about one individual.
Goal! I've spotted an opportunity, found the space and slotted it home. It's what I do. This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Every week across the UK, 85% of school-age students take part in approximately an hour of sport a week. Organised grassroots sport has lower numbers, but it translates to millions of girls and boys between the age of 7 and 20 playing sport. But there is a problem, a big problem.
Without doubt, every year we seem to be seeing more and more young people coming through with significant knee injuries, and primarily we're talking about ACL ruptures. The numbers are staggering and extremely worrying. For every one person that was having an ACL reconstruction in the late 90s, there's now 29 children having those surgeries. So the number of injuries is without a doubt
29-fold.
Yeah.
Evidence of a problem comes from multiple sources. Other surgeons and doctors are waving a warning flag.
We increased by 29-fold amount of operation. Devastating injuries that can cause complete change of the life trajectory and early risk of arthritis. People are committing to one or two sports at most at the moment, if they are going to be part of the local community. And they spend less time developing other skills that will be naturally developed when they are participating in multiple sports.
They're on screens, sedentary, and then suddenly they're in...
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Anyone got gloves in my size? I need 4.
Now, look, I gather that SJ likes to leave you with something a bit weird and interesting here on the UK tonight. And just this evening, we are going to just talk about a Banksy that's appeared on a wall. Well, for residents in Finsbury Park in North London, that became a reality over the weekend after this tree mural popped up on the side of a block of flats. Crowds, of course, have been gathering throughout the day to view the new Banksy artwork, a green splatter effect shape behind a cut-back tree. The elusive artist confirmed the work was in fact his on Instagram. I'm joined now by Bonnie and Amy, who live in the flats that have the Banksy on the outside. Good to see you both. When did you first realise what was going on outside then?
Tomorrow, was it yesterday? Yesterday, yeah. So yesterday I got up in the morning and went for a run and saw people looking at the wall but didn't really think anything of it and ran off in the opposite direction. And then you got back yesterday.
Yeah, I got back in the afternoon and then saw people taking pictures, and I literally popped my head around the corner and just saw all the green everywhere.
When did you realise it was a Banksy? Did you just assume at first glance, that has to be a Banksy, or did you wait for people to confirm it?
Yeah, well, you showed me the photo, didn't you? And I said that must be a Banksy, but we weren't really sure, were we, straight away?
No, there were street artists, that experts that were out here, and they were saying it's definitely a Banksy yesterday afternoon, but then no one kind of knew until this morning when he confirmed it himself.
Look, I know that part of London. There are quite a few Banksys around there, and some have been inadvertently destroyed by the council in previous years down the road in Stoke Newington. Is it that big a deal to have one these days?
I think it's quite cool. I've never kind of lived this close to Banksy before. I'm not from London, so I think it's a really great thing for the community to have. The amount of people that have been on Hornsey Road today is just absolutely fantastic. So I think it is a big deal for the community. I know it looks like it's just some paint on the wall, but I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the community and to kind of put Hornsey Road on the map.
It's a very good answer. The next question, though, is that someone's going to... I mean, we've seen Banksys get nicked when they've been on street furniture and even on walls as well. Any worries that someone's going to try and lift that somehow?
I mean, I don't know how they would. They'd have to take the wall off the building, so I'm not too sure if they can lift. Yeah, they might try, so it's a bit of a challenge, but I guess we'd have to see, really. I mean, it's more... Someone might vandalise it more than anything, but I think our landlord did ring us and say the council are sending people down here. Police will be kind of patrolling a bit just to kind of check it out and just make sure it's OK for security purposes. So fingers crossed it's fine.
I mean, it's kind of a departure from his previous works. And obviously, we've just seen there that people taking a photo of it, it works with the tree in front of it. Does that tree grow leaves? And when it does, is it going to obscure the painting behind it? How's it going to work?
So we've lived in the flat for 3 years, and when we first moved in, the tree was massive and it had loads of leaves on it. My understanding is that the council cut it about a year ago, and my understanding from what I've seen today is that there's pretty good evidence that that tree isn't going to grow any more leaves, which I believe is why he's kind of made this statement about the leaves not growing back and kind of what that means we're doing as a society to our environment.
It works, it works. It's good to know that. Look, Bonnie, Amy, thank you both so much for taking the time. And when I swing by, I'll have a look at the wall of your flat next time. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at the weather now.